Hi, and welcome to Across the Desk. Well, here we are, folks, right at the beginning of election season, and we're going to talk about the race for Oklahoma Senate seat with Inhofe and Gore. First, I'd like to say that our current U.S. Senator holding the senior Senate seat is Jim Inhofe. And Jim Inhofe is, well, pretty old. Not that I want to seem ageist, but he is 85 and he will turn 86 just after the election, and will be 86 when they swear him in January. So, and he'll run for 12 years, which means he will be 92 when his term is over. Now, let's put this on top of the fact that he has already been in the U.S. Congress for 33 years. He's been a senator since '94, so he's been there for quite a while. This is for those guys out there. You see them all the time. Well, we need to get rid of them. You know, these people are in there too long, career politicians. And there has to be something said for experience, but also there has to be something said for somebody who's been in U.S. Congress for 33 years. There's got to be something said about that. You might want to step aside. Also, I mean, you're 85. You're going to be 86. You probably should have retired a long time ago, from my personal perspective and my personal opinion. And that's one of the items I want to get off my chest first about Senator Inhofe. Now, I mean, not just talking about his age, let's just talk about some of his policy decisions and some of his stances and some of his clowniness and kookiness that he's performed on the floor of one of our prestige national institutions. Here we got a guy, he's got a new ad out of him flying a plane upside down, saying, as long as I can fly a plane upside down, I can be a senator. This is fallacious, if anything. I mean, the ability for someone to fly a plane upside down is not the same as the ability to be able to govern, the same as to be able to enact or create policy or to know law. So this ad is an attempt to appeal to the emotions of people that might be considered his base, I suppose. To give them something to say, well, he's still virile, even though he's 85, he can still fly a plane, but you know what? I mean, can he really? I mean, let's go back into Inhofe's record of flying a plane, and when you look back at it, you see first, let's just hit the timeline, okay? 1999, he had flying a plane, the propeller fell off of it. You know, I mean, you're like, okay, well, you know, that's not pilot error, or really is it? Because one of the things you do in training as a pilot is you check out your equipment, you check out your plane, your machinery before you fly. You test it, you make sure it's good to go, because it's really all that important. And here you are in 1999 flying a plane, propeller falls off. Did he not inspect that very well? Is that what happened? So this is what happened in 1999, and it happened near Claremore. He shut down, it says he shut down the engine down and made a safe landing at Claremore Airport when his propeller fell off. That's one incident in 99. Then later, in October 2006, he lands a plane in a rough landing over on Jones Riverside Airport in Jinx. He had a spokesman say that he flew in from Duncan just fine, but right after landing, the tail dropped and spun them around the runway when he landed. Because I guess he didn't land the plane very well, but you know, I mean, here you go. He spun around and it landed and spun him around. And I mean, I that might happen to some pilots or whatever, but I'm pretty sure it's not what they would call an occurrence that happens that often. Here's another thing, you know, and then the infamous one that happened in 2010, where he's down in Port Isabella, Texas, and he lands on a closed runway. It has an X on it. They got construction crews out there, and what he does a little hop. He comes in, he flies over, lands. There's cars and trucks up here in front, and he lands, and then he hops over them. And there's people in those vehicles. And they're like, you know, scared the pants out of him. You know, he said, "Hey, man, we were literally peeing ourselves on the tarmac out there and wondering what's going on." And then, if you want to know the level of corruption that Jim Inhofe is capable of, not only they filed a report on him and want him investigated and everything else, and they did. And what they did was they made him take some retraining if he wanted to keep his license, which he did. I mean, he was reprimanded for it, but later on he used his power of his office. Total corruption here. And not only had the manager of that airfield send him an apology, he also enacted legislation, or tried to enact legislation that would stop the harassment of pilots against, FAA regulations. They're so unnecessary. So this was the stance that Inhofe took. Not that he learned a lesson, or oops, I'm sorry, I didn't, I thought it was perfectly fine for me, I had a call from the tower, nothing like that, anything, just, well, the FAA's gone too far by fining me or making me do some, continuing education to keep my license, so I'm going to use the power of my office to make sure they suffer for it. And that's just not good politics. It's not good policy. It doesn't help anybody but Inhofe. And this is a blatant, self-serving, corrupt thing he did with this one incident. And this isn't the only incident I'm going to talk about his wonderful flying skills. We have another one. He later, he sponsored a bill with the FAA for the enforcement and safety regulations. Such cases had, a manager issue him a letter of apology. Total abuse of power here, and this is what he did. As far as what he did with flying a plane, and several of the little blunders he's had when it comes to airplane flying. So I'm really kind of concerned that he should be flying a plane upside down, not just because of his age, just because of his past record when it comes to actually flying a plane and some of the dangerous stuff he's done. Now let's talk about some more corruption. Just a little case here. Not that long ago, maybe a year, I don't even know if it's been a year, maybe two, the town of Miami got pretty upset because they found out later, not when it was happening, because the way it was done. So we have Senator Inhofe, who is and he's part of the National Defense Committee, and they put together the National Defense Authorization Act. They do this every so often to keep the national defense funded, and he snuck in a little provision there that would take the regulation away from GRDA to manage their lake levels. We're going to give it to the federal, but he did this all because people on Grand Lake, including himself, who owns property on that, could keep the lake levels up because it just makes for better property values for us. Well, that may be true, but what happens is the backwater happens there, and then you flood communities like Miami out. And then you cause, tens of thousands, if not millions of dollars worth of damage to a local community who can ill afford to pay for that. And then you have a senator like Inhofe who's so, against environmental regulations and the like, especially things like FEMA and the National Insurance Flood Program. Where are these people going to go? He's trying to get rid of that too, while also flooding them out. So this is the level of corruption you see with Jim Inhofe when it comes to things like saving his own lake home, as opposed to helping a whole community of people who are his constituents. My last line of item on Jim Inhofe and his corruption would be something that just happened just a few months ago. Here we have a senator privy to information the rest of the public doesn't have, and coming out and saying to the public everything's okay, but while secretly having $750,000 of his stocks liquidated, right before the stock market crashes out. So, hey, it's good for me to get out, but you don't got to worry, please stay in, and that is called corruption. That's also highly illegal, and the problem we have is, we have a bunch of people in power right now that are covering each other's butts, and that's what they're doing here. And you probably won't see much happen with Mr. Jim Inhofe unless we see a big sea change this election, because I think what he did was illegal. I think it was corrupt. I think he did have some kind of hand in it. There's no way his people decided, right now let's just go ahead and dump $750,000 worth of equity and turn that into cash without, we had no idea the market was going to crash, even though our guy we're doing this for is privy to all that information. I kind of find that as just not credible to me. Now, Jim Inhofe, he's currently the chair of the Environmental and Public Works Committee. And one of his first speeches was to come out when charge of this committee to say global warming is a hoax. Now, we all know why he says that. I really don't know if he believes it's a true hoax, but I know one thing Jim Inhofe believes: money. And when it comes from the highly well resourced machine of the oil lobby, especially those people in Texas he represents, because let's be honest, when he was caught in Texas landing on the wrong closed down runway, he was doing that to meet his money donors in Texas, who he really represents. Because if you really believe that Senator Inhofe represents the people of Oklahoma, then you're fooling yourselves. He represents the people that pay him the money. See, he's pretty much a plutocrat, which is pretty much what all Republicans are these days, and he's going to serve where the money interest serves him. So right now, he's getting a buttload of money from oil lobbyist interest in Texas. He's also, if you can see, getting interest from defense contractors as well, so you know where his interests lie. They lie with his constituency that doesn't even live in this state. So there you go. We have Senator Inhofe, who's highly influenced by the money, doing things for the oil industry like denying climate change, so they don't have to hit any of the regulations that would be necessary to help keep our environment clean, because you know that costs money, and we know how much they love money and don't want to let it go for any reason, even if it's detrimental to the lives and well-being of other people. And so that's what you have here. It's exactly what this is. And then with Inhofe, you just get the mix of crazy stuff. You know, there's a quote of him saying that his granddaughter came to him and said, "Poppy, why is it you don't understand global warming?" And he said, "The stuff they teach our kids nowadays, you have to unbrainwash them when they get out." You know, talking about, here we go, they indoctrinate your kids, sending them to schools because they're not teaching them the conservative values he wants them to teach. And this is funny, because, you know, they sit here just like with the president, you know, the other day, you know, hey man, those liberal universities are just, you know, spitting out all this liberalism and everything else, you know. And I remember my college days here in Oklahoma, and sure, there were some of those, but you know, there were plenty on the right too, especially if you go to the business school like I did. There's a lot of them in there. My marketing guy, total Republican. My finance guy, the guy who I took finance classes from, total Republican. And they weren't shy about sharing their views in class. They just weren't. But here we go again with Republicans. They love to dish it. They love to be able to say, hey man, we're going to put "In God We Trust" in every school, and the 10 Commandments, and we're going to put the goodness of Republican conservative values in every cookie cutter school we can think of. But you know what? Whenever they start wanting to sing Kumbaya, or we're talking about everybody being equal, or, you know, the plight of indigenous tribes, well, that's just some liberal hippie bull crap. And, you know, we can't teach that because it's indoctrinating our kids, which, you know, just flies in the face of conservative cowardice you see these days. Like I like to say, they like to dish it with, you know, "In God We Trust," 10 Commandments, but just not willing to take it. And really, in a lot of what I've seen, it's really a bunch of Fantasyland BS they put in their head. And not even that, it's other people putting this in other people's heads, because they know that fear and division sells votes, and it's an easy way to do it. Hey man, if we have some kind of boogeyman, whether it's a socialist, whether we call them Marxist, or we call them elitist, or we call them, you know, university professors, anything that's going to be an attack word or some kind of warning sign for my base, well, yeah, I'm going to use that, because that's the lowest common denominator. I'm going to appeal to these people's emotions, and that's how we're going to get votes. Not through policy. Hey, here's actual policy I'm for, or that I've championed. Nothing like that. Or here's my record of stuff that I've done and what I'm for. No, not that. We want to be able to bash the other guy by not talking about us, by putting out these words out there that really don't mean anything other than attack words and things that'll whip up the base. Well, that's the show this week on U.S. Senator Inhofe, and he's in a battle for election in 2020 for a seat that, if he wins, will take him till he's 92 years old. Anyway, this is Across the Desk with Kit Fairchild, and we'll see you next week.